about personalization, which Shutterfly knows better than anybody else. So please join me in welcoming Kristie.
Thanks, Jessica. And I am so happy to be here tonight. We at Shutterfly are big Adobe fans, and I personally am a big Adobe fan simply because I used to run a company called Borrow Lenses where everyone was a photographer. So it hits home and very near and dear to heart. So I come here to talk to you about the power of personalization today. So it feels like it's a buzzword that every company needs to know. Every company is trying to do it. And, to be honest, I don't think a lot of companies are really doing it well. And a lot of companies are getting it right. And mostly because you don't really want to end up on the front page of New York Times when you do it wrong. So here's a couple kind of frameworks of how you think about it, how you test, how you scale. And with that, I leave you tonight with kind of, how we do it at Shutterfly and kind of best practices there. So rather than telling you who I am, here's kind of exercise number 1. This is a knowledge graph. This is exactly kind of how people start building models. Again, let's start. I've been at Shutterfly 11 years, at JP Morgan 2.5 years, where I helped take the company public. And I've had multiple startups along the way. I have 1,823 Facebook friends, all of which I know really dearly because I know their birthdays. I have 86 posts on Instagram and 0 Twitter tweets. The number 2 most visited site on my browser is Redfin. You might think, why is she on Redfin? Is she ready to buy a house? No, guys. I've been ready to buy a house since 2012. I spent a lot of time trolling deal sites because I refuse to pay retail. I research everything on Amazon ad nauseum, and I probably cross-reference FakeSpot to make sure there's no fake reviews. I have a ton of Berkeley friends and HBS friends, so you can infer I probably went to school there. And I can't stay up to finish a movie anymore past 9 p.m. This one's a little harder. What can you tell about me? I have a new life status. I'm a needy, whiny human being. And 5 years ago, if you guessed that was my boss, you probably would have been right. But about 16 months ago, I gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. And this is kind of one of my new identities now. I'm a new mom. So brands, they'll pick up on this. And if they don't, they should. Right? That you don't need to be expressly told that someone's a new mom or that someone's been at their career for a long time or that somebody went to school here. A lot of personalization and a lot of customization is actually through inference. And so think about it this way. 59% of shoppers who've experienced personalization believe it has a noticeable influence in their purchasing behavior. Good for the customer. Customers want it. It's also good for business. So personalization can reduce acquisition costs by as much as 50%. Imagine cutting that marketing budget by half, lifting revenues by 5 to 15%, and increasing the efficiency of marketing spend by 10 to 30%. McKinsey. There's really no good reason why companies shouldn't be investing in this now. We live in a different world, and why use one blowhorn to talk to everybody? There's no 2 people that are unique, and so there really should be no 2 messages that you're talking to without actually knowing the customer really, really well. So why is scalable personalization so important? Well, time is money. And the more time you take of a customer, the more money you actually owe them. So the next time you're on hold with an airline company or a pharmacy company or repeating your phone number for the 10th time, tell them that they owe you money. You want to reduce complexity through relevant curation to avoid the dreaded paradox of choice. Do you ever wonder that there's Tinder, there's Bumble, there's Match.com? So there's millions of people that you can actually choose from if you're single and looking. But do you find it odd or ironic that when ABC goes out, identifies a bachelor or bachelorette, and then curates 30 people for them, 30 qualified, handsome gentlemen or beautiful ladies, everyone seems to find true love. Don't you find that ironic? The third is kind of better, deeper relationships builds more trust and fosters relationship with your customers. I think this is a universal truth at this point. I don't think getting to know somebody better, I don't think understanding their wants, their ambitions, their life goals, things that make them tick, that never really hurts. And kind of with all the distractions in life, people's attention span and wallet are actually really expensive to gather now. I think, the golden rule, one of our CEO, Chris North, had actually kind of honed this into me. He goes, Kristie, the moment, customer acquisition costs, as long as it's less than lifetime value of a customer, I would spend that all day long. I would go find money to spend for you. And so with that said, getting people to come back and repeat, because as customer acquisition costs get higher and higher, is super, super important. And one thing is making sure you personalize to what exactly they want, when they want, what they want, is really the only way you're going to be able to hit that customer. And lastly, the only time you're settling for generic is when you're at the pharmacy. Everyone wants to be unique. Everyone wants to feel special. So what do these brands have in common? Okay. They've built their entire business knowing exactly who you are and what your preferences are. And they find a way to magically create compelling personalized experiences. They read your mind before you even know you want something. And so, as I said in the beginning, how do you get started? Like a lot of businesses, as I said, don't do this really well. And a lot of businesses really kind of tiptoe into this simply because, again, you don't want to feel creepy. You don't want to feel like someone's invading your privacy. So here's how you get started. You really define who you're targeting, segmentation, really define who you're building experience for, and really hone in on that. What are you saying to them? What you say is super, super important because, again, every single person has differences in kind of the way they look at the world. Use templates, use dynamic content, use variables. Define what is really your end message. When and where. The delivery of these messages is especially important. Imagine when someone says, I love you, and you say, thank you. That's really, really a great message. But the when and the where, that's really also what is super key in identifying. And why are you saying it? Like, give them a reason to listen to you. And lastly, how you integrate kind of into your data and to your measured results is super important. Why? Because you want to be able to operationalize the data. You want to be able to provide that user the feedback loop, right? So if you miss the boat, that's okay. You don't want to miss the boat the second, the third, the fourth time. Customers have a very short attention span, and most of them aren't super forgiving. So at the end of the day, iterate a little bit at a time until you've reached that right recipe. And then after that, you think about how you're building your product. This is exactly how, I would start, and this is how Shutterfly kind of starts some of our really, really tough problems that we're solving. We start with a hypothesis. We say, this is the problem we're trying to solve. And typically there's probably hundreds of problems that we ask ourselves every day. So the second thing I think about is how do I size the opportunity? If I solve this problem A, is it going to deliver $3 million of revenue? Or is it going to deliver a couple dollars of revenue? That's probably not even worth our conversation. We end up doing rapid prototyping, MVPs. We did one for Apple last year. We did a couple for some of our photo gift projects. We do really, really quick testing MVPs. We put it in front of customers. We use usertesting.com. We really, find a way to make sure that we have product market fit. And then when we finally get enough of conviction that we're on the right direction, we operationalize, and then we measure and test the crap out of it. Iterating, I can't emphasize the importance of iteration. You likely won't get it right the first time. We won't pick the right photo for you. We won't pick the right background for you. We won't pick your right holiday card. But you know what? After we learn more and more data points through knowledge graphs and building algorithms, we'll eventually get it right. So lastly, this is kind of where you end up scaling. Figure out after you have that secret recipe, that secret sauce, you give enough, somebody out there gives you enough conviction that this is going to work, and then you scale the product. So this is probably kind of something that you all have seen. There's so many different ways you think about personalization. There's data, there's scoring, there's machine learning, the customization. These are a dime a dozen. But how do we do it at Shutterfly? So in the framework of what you guys do at work or the data sets that you have access to, We access a very broad set of photos. We learn from every single person who comes to our site. We pre-make suggestions using algorithms. We know that your favorite color is pink. We know that every photo book you make starts with a travel destination. We know that which photos are most meaningful to you. We know which people are most important in your lives because their pictures keep on appearing in your photos. We personalize communication and triggers. So we do notifications on your mobile phone. We send you rediscovery emails. We send you email pushes. We send you products that we've made for you. And we build products that drive growth and virality. So for every single holiday card purchase that you buy, you're sending it to hundreds of people. And those hundreds of people look at it. They come to Shutterfly. They send, they find their Christmas card on Shutterfly and they send it to hundreds of people. And lastly, we build really strong feedback loops that are constantly refining our algorithms, both through implicit and expressed behaviors. So most customers aren't going to sit there and take a 20-page survey for you. You need to figure out what behaviors that they're taking, both on their site, on your site, or through their browsing history or whatever that might be, and constantly take those inputs into your algorithms. Here's a good example. I'm just going to talk you through how we kind of do some of our photos. So here is where customers tell us, this is a favorite. This is a favorite photo. And in other cases, we actually identify some of their favorite photos. Why? Because we know that these two little kids are super important in a mom's life. So some of your other favorite photos might include them as well. Then we go there, and if you look for the bottom, we have sections where it's just made exactly for you. We look at what products you've purchased before. We look at what designs you gravitate towards. We look at what season it is. Then we go there and we rank photos. We say, this one's blurry. This one, people aren't facing forward. This one, really doesn't show people's faces. This one's cropped imperfectly. This one's too dark. This one's too light. This one's too saturated. And then we start learning from their photos over and over again. And then we start ranking them. We say, this one's a good photo. This one's a bad photo. This is what we should up. This one works well for a mug. This one works well for a canvas print. This one's really, really crappy. So we would never recommend it on anything. And then we make products just for you. So this is actually a photo of my little girl and our family. And if you think about it, if you look at right there, right here, we allow you to provide feedback to us. And even if you don't click that feedback, we know when you edit it and when you add it to your cart, we know the changes that you're making. Just so that the next time we serve you something up, more relevant, more personalized to what you want. And even after you've added something to cart, then we go, what else can we do with this person's photos? This is ironically actually powered by Adobe Test and Target, Adobe Target. So we use Adobe to help us understand, what do people really, really want? What inputs can we send Adobe so they can give us really, really strong recommendations? After that, we figure out, what do people have in their cart? What do they gravitate towards? And so here, I end up spending an extra $27.50 for a case that I probably never intended to buy. And lastly, here's some parting thoughts. At Shutterfly, we really try to get to know that customer. We spend every waking moment thinking about, what do they want next? What products are they interested in? What signals have they given us to know what would they resonate with in the future? Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next year, but 5 years from now, what are they going to be looking for? Second command is, be maniacal about their stated and implied needs. We really look at this on a daily basis. I think one of the things that we realize is that most of our customers, they don't come to us on a daily basis, and we look for engagement points to make sure that whatever their needs are, that they're met. So we launch things like Free Book a Month, where every single month we're sending you a free book of all your photos. Third commandment is, know that they change over time. So 16 months ago, I was looking for bottles and diapers, and now I'm actually not looking at diapers anymore. I'm looking at things to potty train my daughter. So behaviors change over time, needs change over time. So companies shouldn't be static. You got to figure out how to adapt to your customers. And fourth, serve them well. Be maniacal about serving them well, and they will serve you well. So with that, I bid you all adieu, and I'm happy to take any questions.
That water bottle with your baby in her hands up, that was such a good one. I mean, that was like, I'm like, the next one. Yeah, the water bottle. Oh my, is that possible? That is so cute.
You can buy any of these products. These are all in production, so you can buy any of these products. But if you think about, like as you said, like these are products where I came to Shutterfly to make one item, but all these products, I literally could just add these to my cart. There's no work on your end. Yeah.
You mentioned using Adobe Target in the sense of maybe doing this more algorithmically or at larger scale with these data points. Is it possible, is it even approachable as a task to try to accomplish any kind of personalization before you have the app instrumented in that way? I mean, is that even feasible?
I think you can. I think the problem with that is like you don't get that many chances with customers. And so until you know something about them, data point about them, and you figure you may do it if you have a large set of data from somewhere else where you're like, there's a 99% chance that this customer fits into that data set, then yeah, you may not need to have built all the instrumentation and all the product. But until then, we're a product-driven culture, we're a data-driven culture, so we really want to make sure that there's a lot of reputational risk when we get something wrong. We really want to make sure that at the end of the day, we're giving you, we have our kind of philosophy is we have one chance to impress you. So if we are launching stuff that, especially to a broad swath of people, that just isn't impressive, we typically won't put that out. I would say wait, and I would say like iterate with a small set of people before you actually scale it. And that could be as easy as doing usability testing with a group of product managers or 20, 30 people.
Do you collect data from any other sources than what the users come to your platform?
We do. I mean, to a certain degree, we from a marketing perspective, we do look at data from outside sources, and I think for the most part, we build lookalike models. We really try to understand. I mean, that's really key, right? Like, I think lookalike models are so key for our business. I mean, this data is pretty old, but like a couple of years ago, we were like, where are customers shopping? Like, if we know our customers are shopping at Butterbarn Kids or Whole Foods or whatever the case might be, we start trying to figure out like what are their habits, what drives them, what products are they buying. And what promotions can we serve up to them? There's some people that are only motivated by free products, and there's some people that are motivated by kind of beautiful products that they can use, utility of the product. So it really just depends. We do use outside sources, but we also use mostly inside sources.
Just sort of expanding on that, how do you structure those team meetings? What kind of questions do you ask in those meetings when you're thinking about finding other ways that the customer will spend? I mean, thinking from a very practical standpoint, right? We have a product right now. We're very focused on one service, and we have an opportunity to sell lots of other products, but we need to take our team through that process and understand how you go from, one to many. And just from an early stage standpoint, practically, how does that happen?
So when I was joined Shutterfly, it was a $54 million company. We're about a $2 billion company now. And this is one of the things where every single time I wanted to launch a product, my boss would ask me, would you bet your house on it? I'm like, sure, I don't own one. Of course I would. And the way you think about the product is really start about what's your hypothesis. So if you have one product right now and I'm going into another product line or another market, start with a hypothesis. Like, we believe this product is going to serve that market really, really well. Why? Why do you believe that product do no competitors exist? Is the product just well suited? Do you find like there's a gap in that market right now that no one's addressing? Size that opportunity. I think too many times, I would say, as I said, I worked in a couple startups before. I think too often we use our own intuition and we say, oh, I love this product. Hundreds of people must love it as well. When you actually start talking to people, they're like, I don't know that I would use it. Not really. Like, you may need it. You may need it. But I don't know that that person needs it and that person needs it. And so if you're actually, trying to launch a new product, I don't know if it's in a new market or just in kind of in the United States, but I would actually, the first thing that I would think about is doing usability testing. Like, take that physical product and do usability testing with a small set of customers. I think the way I think about it is, typically we have people come in weekly, monthly, what I realize is when 30 people are yelling at me about the same thing, I have a problem. There's something wrong, or there's something that I'm not carrying, or there's something that I haven't built. But if it's like, you get 30 people and it's a mixed bag, that's where then you're like, what happened? What happened to my hypothesis? How big is this opportunity really? I thought everybody wanted this product. And that's probably what you think too, right? Like, why would you launch in another space if you don't think that everybody or there's a big enough market there? So I'd use sample sizes, and don't use them as kind of, the holy grail, but use them as directional.
The cup is a really nicely done photo. Was that a professional photo?
It was. It's my professional photo.
Without a white background, that wouldn't have worked so well.
There's a lot of other photos that I think could have worked with that cup. That actually is photoshopped in by me. But like if you look, the one on the very left, a lot of the photos that we have aren't professional photos. Actually, ironically, that's the only set of professional photos I've taken. So yeah, there's a lot of photos that can work really well.
How do you find from your customers? Do you find they usually have photos that are going to work, or do they find that they have to do some work on them?
We try to do a lot of the work. So we have in the back end, we do have rendering platforms that help kind of make that photo better before we print it. So when a customer gives us a really crappy photo, we actually will give a little signal saying, your photo is too low res, please change it. So we have things built in to help the customer be successful. And a lot of times I will say that most photography, most photos on Shutterfly aren't professional photos. They're kind of everyday photos. And they're of kids, they're of families, they're of couples, they're of landscapes, travels, anything. So I don't think you need a professional photographer. Beautiful products.
In regards to the photos, and they are very beautiful, and it is a great platform to make your photos better. My question is in regards to a photo being taken off the site and used in stock. Sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't, but the privacy issue of the user, how do you guys address that? Saying, oh, hey, I had this photo on Shutterfly and all of a sudden I'm seeing it on a display model at Business Cards 100 or something like that. How do you guys prevent that, or how do you protect the customer?
Your photos are yours. We don't sell your photos. We don't sell your data. I can't comment on that. I don't know enough about it, but we're really, 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 from a company culture, from a company perspective, like, we respect your privacy. We really want to make sure we don't, kind of misuse someone's trust in us, right? So, we really try to make sure that your photos are secure. We also want to make sure that we don't sell your information to third parties. Yeah, we do send your photo to a fulfiller. Like, we have to. We can't make the product otherwise. But to the extent we don't sit here and try to make a ton of money off your photos.
Do the predictions that you're making go stale? So, like, especially how long does this prediction hold up in the face of seasonality?
It's constantly refined. It's constantly refined on a daily, weekly basis. Like, people change, their photos change, their needs change. So we're always looking at your photos every single time. So, we have a Shutterfly app, and when you upload your photos, we have auto upload. And so we're constantly looking to score your photos. So your favorites today that we suggest for you are most likely may or may not be your favorites tomorrow if you've uploaded another set. They could be if they're amazing photos. Don't get me wrong. Like we'll keep those, and especially if you engage with them, right? So if some of these photos that you look at, some of these professional photos, you better believe I paid for those photos. I've printed them 100 times, and the more you interact with your photos, we assume that they're your favorites. The more you interact with your friends, we assume those are your favorites. So we typically will have a very, I would say, to answer your question, very, very frequent.
Thanks for the great talk. I have two questions. First is if you can go back to that slide where you talk about hypothesis, where exactly, I mean, in case of an early stage company which are just starting out with a product, which stage is where personalization starts? Is it the number 4, the hypothesis slide? Yeah, this one. So when do you really start worrying about personalization? I mean, which stage is that?
I would say it starts day one, right? Like you need to know who your customer is. And again, there are cheap ways to personalize, right? You can merge docs. You can literally like send 3 different versions of your email on MailChimp if you need to. But it's making sure that you have that level of like measurement to understand. If you sent, literally you could type up 3 different, and I've done this, you could type 3 different emails, send it out to your customers, figure out which ones have the best click through, or figure out which ones actually had, and put a promo code on it, put a different promo code on each one, and figure out which one actually your customers respond to the best. I don't think you need to build complex algorithms day one, but I definitely think you have to have personalization in mind, especially if you're building a product that isn't a be-all product for everybody. If you have a product that's for a niche customer, I think you better believe that day one you need to build in kind of that thought of how am I going to serve that customer better every single day. Yeah. Don't wait until you're building gigantic, machine learning data and having to hire 10 data science to analyze the data that you get. Like there are different ways that you can kind of iterate day after day. I remember when I started one of my startups, I literally emailed like 1,000 people, and the first email I got like 6 responses back. I was like, well, I don't know if that's good. I don't know if that's bad. So the next time I emailed 500 people the same one, and I modified the email, and you saw the second email B that I modified, and it wasn't like dear ex customer. It was actually dear Christina, dear David, dear Ryan, dear Brian. That one got like 50 responses back. So I said, okay, no one wants to be called dear customer. And this was like eons ago. This was like 15 years ago when I did this.
Okay, thank you. So I have a second question as well. So we are an early stage company, like 4 people. We're kind of scaling our product right now. So far, I as a CEO has worked on the product, but we are getting ready for first product hire. So what's your recommendation to really go about the first person who will handle the product?
I get this question a lot. So as you know, as Jessica mentioned, I come from both the GM and PM background. And there's been people who've said, I really want a pure play PM. I always go back. I'm like, what does that mean? Like, I don't know what that means. You don't want me to think about the business? You don't want me to think about the customer? You just want me to build the product? Is that what you mean? So the way I think about kind of hiring, like especially very early stage startup level, is you have to hire a PM that either one, and it kind of depends on what your startup is. Like, do you need somebody with very specific skill sets? Like you're going after this specific market, payments, for example. You would want somebody who's worked at Square or Clover or whatever before. But if you're saying like, hey, I need to figure out product market fit. I need to figure out, I need somebody to write user stories one day. I need to figure out somebody who's willing to talk to customers the next day. I think what's really great is, people who do have a very strong kind of technical background. By technical, I don't mean like you're only going to hire engineers, but people who could think, who have really good sense of like understanding big concepts and distilling it down to, individual user stories and individual kind of questions, hypotheses. I go back to this, right? Because as a startup, you're probably not going to get it right. You may, but you're probably going to go through multiple iterations and you're probably going to go through multiple features before you're like, oh, this one makes the most sense, or this is the one that. So, long story short, I think you'd like really strong product people early on, especially if it's your product hire. I think you have to hire somebody with a really strong business sense, very good intuition, right? You don't have a lot of money. I'm saying hopefully you'll have a lot more, but like right now, especially if you're a 4-person startup, I'm assuming you don't have a lot of money. You really need somebody who's willing to roll up their sleeves, talk to customers one day, write user stories the next day, be the QA person the next day. That's what I would, and especially if you're still in that phase. If you're a little bit more like, I know I'm going to build this niche product, I know it's like highly specialized, I would probably then go recruit at whoever you don't think is doing it well, go take one of their product managers.
I have 3 questions for you. First one is when you have a new user, they just sign up on your website, you don't know anything about them other than probably their name and an email address. If and how you personalize for them?
We typically don't. I mean, that is the hardest customer to personalize for, is when you don't know anything about them. So what we do is we make a lot of evergreen kind of landing pages. We try to make it seasonal. We know that even if a customer, we don't know anything about him, but you're coming to us closer to Christmas, we're still going to serve you up Christmas cards. We're still going to, serve you up anything that's that's red and green and gold. Like we do our best. And that's, the moment you land on our site is the moment we start collecting data about you, so that, and data in like where you click, how you respond, how do we make the site easier? How do we make the site better? We don't try to like figure out like where you live, what your address is. Like it's not we don't think it's in a creepy way. It's more of just like, how do we learn? And a lot of this is driven by like, again, algorithms on the back end. So it's not a human being trying to figure out or trying to stalk you. That is probably the biggest challenge that we have. Like when we don't know anything about a customer, that we don't know how they came in, they don't know how they found us. That's always really, really challenging. But we figure that there's universal truths at that time. Like people come here to buy holiday cards. People come here because it's Mother's Day. Like, what are the best gifts? So right now, like if you look at our site, our homepage, that's one of the things that I'm responsible for. It's everything's Mother's Day, and so we assume that not everybody on our site comes and is looking for a Mother's Day gift. We know that, but we know that a lot of people are, and so we just try our best.
Second question is related to your answer. You mentioned feedback loops in your talk. Are these automated feedback loops, or do you have human intervention somehow?
They're automated feedback loops.
Okay.
Yeah, we want to make sure. Again, photos in general are very kind of sensitive, and a lot of privacy issues around them, as the woman in the front had alluded to. So we really try to be good about, like it's one thing when a machine looks at it, it's another thing when humans are like digging through your account, and so that's not something that we do. I mean, I don't think I can comment any further, but for the most part, almost everything that we do is algorithmically driven.
Okay. But what I meant, so that's partly answered my question, but what I also meant was, once you get more data, do you have like data scientists retraining the model, or is it a feedback loop that automatically gets a new feedback and then you don't even
It depends. It depends on if we have models built out for it, then it's automatic. And if we don't have models built out for it, then we go like, here's a new set, like especially if it's a new feature, and we are putting new instrumentation and we have to start building models for it, that's when the data scientists come in. So we look at, and what data scientists essentially do is like looking for patterns, right? Like either unique user behavior patterns or generic user behavior patterns that they classify to users. So we know that people who log in from 7 to 10 p.m. typically like red mugs. So, typically when we think about that, like how do we serve up more red mugs to people who come between 7 and 10 p.m.? I mean, it's very much like how Netflix knows I stop watching TV at 9 p.m. they factor that into their model, I'm sure.
Thank you. And the last question is for personalization. How do you structurally organize the personalization team? Is it by product? Is it by user segment? Is it by category? What have you find most effective?
It's very much built into our DNA at Shutterfly. So how we think about personalization is our marketing is personalized. Our CEO is like we need different vehicles to be able to talk to different customers. Don't give me one blowhorn to talk to everybody. That doesn't work. We also have a data science team. We also have a data analytics team. We have product managers that really, try to understand and work with third-party vendors to really understand what products we need to serve up. I would say it permeates across the entire organization. It's not just one team that does it. And I think the downfall of one team that does it is marketing spends all this time personalizing and you land them on a generic site. So it's not great for lifecycle management of our customers. Mm-hmm.
A very, very specific personalization question. We have a product. How much of it is it a taboo to ask the gender of the person? So based on the gender, we kind of can give different voice responses saying that, Ryan is free now. He is going to start something now. We can use the word he or she in the responses if we know the gender.
Yeah.
How much of it is a taboo, at the very start, tell me if this person is a male or a female.
It's hard to answer that question. I will say that typically people depends on what they want. Like I'll give you an example. Like Stitch Fix, I sat there and I was more than happy to fill out your 10-question questionnaire, 20-question questionnaire, because I want to make sure that the clothes that you send me fit, right? So it really depends on what that is for the customer. Like, is there really any value to them for them giving you your gender? If you're like, hey, I just want to make sure that I don't call someone Mr. or Mrs., which did happen to me at a dealership before, a car dealership before, I think it's a hard question to say unless it's like, hey, I need to know if you're a Mr. or Miss because I'm selling you a specific product that only women would use, So if your question is, should you ask the customer? I would say I would grab a group of 30, 40, 50 people together and be like, is this offensive to anybody? Like, does this really make a difference in your product? If the answer is yes, then yeah, you should absolutely ask. If there's any way that you can deduce that somebody's a female or a male, I would find a way to do that. But I think if you're a startup and you don't want to offend people, right? Like you don't want to call Mrs. Whatever Rodriguez or Mr. You probably have to figure out how sensitive that topic is. And I would say like err on the side of conservatism. Don't err on the side, especially if you think it's going to be offensive.
Awesome.
The ones that are most valuable, I think, to us is typically historical behavior. So people are creatures of habit, and so order history is very telling as to what people really like. We look at our customers and kind of new trial and repeat customers. We figure out who's been here before, what have they looked at. Typically, if somebody in my mind, like if somebody here has come and has bought photo books 5 years in a row, and what we do is, hey, like how do we test them to get to try a new product? We'll test them, but after like a couple times, if that test fails, we're not going to keep on trying to shove cards down a person's neck, a person's throat. You test in kind of as non-offensive as we can, but you realize that if somebody keeps on coming back here every single year for the same product, capitalize on that and be like, hey, you want 2 photo books this year? You want you want buy one get one free of a photo book this year. Like you really just hone in when you realize that your customers really has found kind of an attachment to your product.
So specific to developing an MVP, which I think is one of the most exciting and kind of daunting parts of like launching a new product.
Mm-hmm.
You listed several great kind of resources to use, usertesting.com, focus groups. Could you walk through, in your experience, like what has worked well in terms of sequencing? Do you typically start with a user group? Do you start with usertesting.com? And what like lessons, pitfalls have you seen in this kind of MVP pre-coding or pre-production phase?
Yeah, that's a great
experienced?
question. And it depends on where you are at the stage of your product. Is it ideation? What I find really, really super important, actually, when we do usability testing, is when we can let that person interact with our product. And it may not need to be production ready. It may be a prototype. It may just be UI mocks. But I think at the end of the day, like it's very hard to be like, do you like this? Unless you're really like, I have no business yet. I don't really know what product I'm going to launch. I'm just going to test ideas out. I think it's really good to be able to build out beta version or V1 of your product, as scrappy as you can build it, right? And preface your user group with, this is not the final product. I mean, this is beta. This is before beta. This is V1. Please bear with us. And typically, people are very forgiving, right? Like, I don't know how long Gmail was in beta for, but it was in beta for a long time. And so, typically, when you preface people with, I'm an entrepreneur. This is the product that I've launched. I really appreciate your time. Any honest feedback would be great. Please don't be afraid to give me really direct and critical feedback, because I want to make this product better. People are very receptive to that. And so in your question, to answer your question directly, in sequencing, I would, unless you're trying to find a business, which it might be different, but if you have a business in mind, you have a product in mind, I would rapid prototype it as fast as I can, as cheap as I can, get it in front of 30 people. If you have 1 out of 30 love it, I don't know that you may have a great product on your hands. If you have, a significant portion of that, or majority of that population, or a significant portion of that population, enough of that population, and think about representative. If you're saying like, hey, this product is a niche product, I really only want 10% of the people in this world to even know about it or use it, then maybe you don't need 9 out of 10 people to love it. Maybe you actually just need the person, your target person. It could be that, that person sitting in that seat. If that person loves it, and that person loves it, and that person loves it, you may only need 3 out of 30. So it really depends on the actual product. But I will say rapid prototyping, I think, is pretty key. I don't think you can go in usability testing or user testing and just speak to people. I think it goes in one ear, goes out the other. Did I answer your question? Okay.
One last question. She's still around afterwards in case you guys have other questions.
Can you share how at Shutterfly you go through product discovery process at a high level, your product planning, road mapping, whatever you...
Sure. So I think road mapping...
Has it changed over time?
Yeah, I think it has. So one of the kind of disciplines that we try at Shutterfly, and we are a company with a finite set of resources, and I would say most companies are like that. Some bigger behemoths might not be, but we are definitely a company with a finite set of resources. And we really, really, really have to believe that every product that we launch, I feel like the question that you have to ask is, will you bet your house on it, right? Because you can make mistakes, and mistakes are fine to make, but you can't make that many mistakes when you're a company of our size. There's reputational risk. There's, customer anger risk. There's really, really nasty email risk, right? So the way we think about it is like, what are the big rocks? Like, and when we classify some of our projects, like, what are the things that we absolutely, absolutely need to do? Whether it's product hygiene, platform hygiene, whether it's, just production support. We think about that and we say, every year, that number is anywhere between X and X%, and just set that aside so you know what you have to play with. how we think about it is we count typically, like, last year we had X number of engineers. Each engineer is worth this many person months. And we say, this is the pool that we're playing with. How would we divvy up this pool? So we look at projects, and the way we look at projects, a lot of it is, are there some projects that are super strategic to the company that may not pay off in the short term, but we really need to invest in them because 5 years down the line, this is exactly what customers are going to want. They may not know it now, but we know that 5 years down the line. I don't think 5 years ago someone said, I want you to put my photo on this mug and have me never think about it again and just send it to my house. I don't, and there's always that classic example of Ford and kind of the faster horse. But we think about projects and like big rocks. Like, what are the big rocks that we absolutely have to get done? It's existential to the company. Then we go back, and that could be whatever. I'm making numbers up, but I could say that's 60%, 70% or 60% of our roadmap. And then there's always this small bucket of just really like very innovative kind of thinking, like pushing the boundary, pushing ourselves essentially. Like, yeah, this may suck, and yeah, this may not work out, but it's cheap, and we're going to do it really quickly, and we're going to fail fast. And so there's always, I feel like, especially maybe if you're not a startup, when you have kind of decent growth already, you got to still know that if you don't innovate and you don't dedicate like a pretty significant portion of your time to innovation, that someone else is going to eat your lunch. So the way, and I would say, like, at some of my startups before, we typically put 70% into kind of core platform, and we did 30% of innovation. And that number either went up or down depending on how well we did the last year and how successful those innovations are. So what I find is, like, if you have, one kind of breakthrough product, it's easier to invest next year on other breakthrough products. And so I would say that there is always X percentage of your roadmap that you need to save for just the maintenance of your systems, of your customer service issues, or whatever. And a good number is it probably, if you're looking for a number, is probably, depending on, again, this is super broad and generalized, but I would say 20-30% of your roadmap probably needs to, if you don't have a product that has existed over a couple of years, 20-30% of your roadmap, make sure that you actually know that you're listening to customers, taking their feedback. The one thing I will say, and I will say that this is very common in kind of everywhere I worked, is there's always a vocal minority. There's always a vocal minority who write in, and I am actually very grateful for people who write in and give feedback to us, but always know that that may be a vocal minority. So use intuition, use science, use data to either act on it or understand that this may be one irate person, and they may have had a bad day and they're taking it out on you. So I will say that take that 20 to 30% kind of with a grain of salt, and but definitely I will say there's probably maintenance, core, and innovation.
Thank you.
Oh. Thank you.
Cool. So thanks so much. She'll, I believe, still be around.
I will be around.
Okay, great. So any additional questions, unanswered questions, please feel free to go up to her afterwards. Now is time for shout-outs. There's a T-shirt here and already a volunteer.
So the company is Chrome Studio, and we create images that sell. And so we use artificial intelligence and crowdsourcing to do the image that she was showing on her cup. So that image actually comes to us, done about 1 million of them, of customers like her, like yours, but they take it in their kitchen or in their living room, and then we make recommendations to them. So we talk about personalization. So we'll make a recommendation to them of a classic background, of a creative background, sunset or a field, or a seasonal background, Mother's Day or Easter. And then they'll say, that's the background that I want, and then we'll make that image for them. And so personalization is quite interesting. we have thousands of possible designs. And the question is, how do we make a recommendation to them to make it personal for them? And we use artificial intelligence, but just you were asking a question about asking someone whether it's a male or a female. You can tell that pretty easily if you have an image. You can tell a lot about them. But initially, we would do a distance between two images. So if you ordered, a white background, and we had someone else that looked like you, we would then offer them a white background. But we realized that if you were wearing a red shirt and that other person was wearing a white shirt, the delta wouldn't be very similar. And so we found that posing was actually a very good indicator of what image should be personalized. And so if you have a particular pose and someone else had that pose and they order a background and they gave it a 5 stars, we're going to show you that one. And that works really well with babies, and it works really well with people and so on. And that's one way to do personalization. So when you think of personalization, use ML, but then try to figure out whether or not the ML is getting thrown off. And so we use still the distance between two images, but that's a smaller K. The pose is the K that we use for personalization.
Hello, my name is Avnish, and I'm a founder CEO of a startup which has built an engagement and fun measurement platform for schools. So essentially, a platform goes in the classrooms as well as the school staff uses it, and they do activities which essentially, build the classroom engagement. And as a part of the engagement, we get lots and lots of photos uploaded to the platform, and essentially we monetize engagement for the schools as well. So we're kind of early stage right now. We have raised some money, and we are looking for anybody who can handle product as well as the UX people. So if anybody is interested in it, please talk to me, and we should get to the next level. Thank you.
Thanks. Anybody else?
Hi, I'm Rodrigo. The name is not so easy, but I think the company's name is going to be easier. It's Birdie. We're creating a company to help people in their product research journey, focusing on those people who really cannot research well using, for example, Reddit and Quora and Amazon like a heavy user. So the idea is to make it even the fight for the consumer against the e-commerce algorithms. And we're just releasing a small experiment, which is a bot that is going to ask you a few questions and try to recommend really relevant products for you. We learned in the first slide from Kristie that she really likes to research, but there are people who just cannot do it. So they suffer from anxiety about going to lots of websites, and we really want to help those people. About becoming a mom, there's also an interesting segment, because that's a change in your life where you start to research products that are not part of your habit. So this is an interest segment that we're trying to help. And right now we're focusing on electronics. So we're looking for people who are actually looking for new TV or smartphone or laptop or headphones to try. So if you're interested in helping us learn more, just go to ask.birdie.ai, and there's an experiment there. You can help us learn more and build a greater product. Thank you. BIRDIE, Birdie. Yeah, Birdie. Ask.birdie, yeah.
Thank you.
Ryan from Adobe. If anybody has any experience in security, we're looking for some product people in security, doubly so if you have any interest in moving to Austin.
Anybody else? Cool. Then just run back up to the front. Let's wrap it up this time. I wanted to thank Kristie again. And then next month, quick shout out for next month. We do these the first Wednesday of every month. So the first Wednesday of June, we're hosting Anne Raimondi. She is currently a board member at Asana, formerly board member of SendGrid and was SVP of operations at Zendesk. She's incredibly impressive, has been around the Valley, has done product operations and a whole slew of other jobs in between. So please come out for that. Thank you guys.